Hello and welcome. My name is Mark Schneider. I'm the CEO of the Elator. I decided to put this video together to kind of answer some of the most common questions that I've received over the last 11 years. A lot of it has to do with measuring, and then there's just some kind of general questions that I answer. So what some people ask is, how does it actually work? And the way I describe it is it's really not a complicated device. It's basically just a splint. So if you were to grab the head of your penis right now, pull it forward until it stopped, that's pretty much what it's going to feel like when you're wearing it. So it doesn't do anything with blood flow. It doesn't engorge you. It basically just keeps you extended. So if you're completely flaccid or partially erect or fully erect, it'll just hold you extended. So that's basically how the device works. The other main questions I get are all around measuring. So on our website, we do offer a kind of a PDF printout version. I typically don't recommend using that at all. And the reason behind it is there's not a problem with the length, because the length is basically going to be the same. And if you were to print this out, you want to make sure you printed the right proportions, and you can check it by each one of these spaces. Each one of these numbers is basically a ½ inch. So from 0 to 10, it should be 5 inches. So that's how you can double check it. But the length is actually going to get you the same length as you would with the band. The problem is the girth. So to measure the girth, you need to use lubricant and you need to pull it forward. And using this paper ruler, you just can't lubricate it. You can't get it cinched down. And so maybe you're thinking, okay, well, I'll just cinch it down and it's going to be okay. But if you can imagine grabbing the head of your penis, pulling it forward while you're dry, and then do it again when you're lubricated, it's going to slip right off. So if you're insistent on using the paper, maybe you say you're in a super hurry or you're out of the country and you don't want to wait for the device, the measuring kit, you could use this. But whatever measurement you come up with, just go one size shorter. So if you come up with an F, then go with an E. So I highly recommend using the band, the measuring kit. I know it takes a couple extra days, but the worst thing is getting the device. You're hoping it's going to work, you get it, and it slips off or it doesn't fit right because you didn't want to wait for it. But anyway, so basically wait for this device and then follow the instructions. Then there's a lot of questions people have about the measuring. So one thing is, as for the length, a lot of people overthink it, okay? So basically just follow the directions. Like it said, pinch the back, push it back into the above your penis, and just push it into your skin a little bit. The video says pelvic bone, and what happens is some people that have a little extra fat, they're pushing it back, and like the arms are shaking, so they're getting in like an extra inch or two. You don't need to do that. You just need to push it back enough that's going to give you enough support. I mean, kind of visualize the device on you. You're not going to be pressing in like that. It's just going to be gently holding you out. So just basically press until it gets back a little bit into your skin, maybe push into it a little bit, and then measure to the tip as instructed. Now, some people are saying, well, I'm going to measure behind the head because it doesn't make sense to measure behind the tip. So don't do that. Make sure you're measuring to the tip. We actually used to have people measure behind the head, and we had around a 50% failure rate. So what we did is we now ask people to measure to the tip, and we make an adjustment for you. So depending on the length of your penis, the adjustment is a little different. Plus also, you're measuring from the top, and it actually attaches to the bottom. So when you actually attach the elator, it kind of goes in like this a little bit. So we do make another adjustment. So long story short, follow the directions, don't overthink it, measure to the tip, and then give us that number. As the instructions say, if you're between two numbers, you're on the line, then use the smaller number. So as for the girth, this is the really important part. Got to use lubricant. Don't even bother measuring if you're not using lubricant. So you can use anything. You can use lube, coconut oil, vegetable oil, it doesn't matter. But just follow the instructions. And like I said, you just pinch it on there, pull it forward, try to get it to slip off, and pull it forward to the point where you want it. Some people keep pulling it forward until they force it off, but say pull it forward like, okay, that's about where it should be. That's all you have to do. You have to get to that point, but just make sure it's snug enough. One of the big things a lot of people are worried about is when they order, they don't want to strangle themselves. They don't want to make it too tight. So there's two main things to consider there. One is the area behind the head of your penis where the elator attaches only grows around 40% of what your shaft and the head does. So you're not going to have anywhere near the expansion. The other thing to consider is the elator is actually, it's all stainless steel. There's a stainless steel bar in here, but the top third has a spring in it. So it does allow for a little bit expansion and contraction. So if you're fully erect when you put it on, it's going to extend a little bit, and as you go flaccid, it'll shrink down. So long story short on that is basically just follow the instructions. Don't worry about it being too snug. When people say, well, how tight should it be? I basically say snug enough till so it doesn't hurt. You don't want it to hurt. If it's hurting, then go up to the next size. But you want it snug enough because you want it to stay on, okay? So don't worry about it cutting off blood flow or, you know, not being able to ejaculate. You can ejaculate with the Elator. That's another common question. So just follow the instructions, make sure it's snug enough, because when people do reorder a new shaft, which is about 20% of the time, so this will get you about a 80% first try rate. The 20% of the time, it's usually always the girths that gets adjusted, and it's usually always smaller. So keep that in mind when you go to measure it. Now, the other thing to consider for a lot of people, the common questions they have is like, so what happens if you lose an erection? Or can I use it with a pump? So let's go over those real quick. So losing the erection, it's kind of the same thing. Like a lot of common conditions for this would be like venous leakage. You start out erect, and then you start going flaccid. So yes, you can definitely put the Elator on while it's fully erect. Again, remember 40% of the area behind the head doesn't grow as much. And then there is this contraction, right? So it's going to attach while it's big, and then it kind of stays on while you go flaccid. In some rare instances where you're fully erect and then you go completely flaccid, you may need two Elators. Some people have that. It's very rare, but some people have it. They start out with one size, and then as they get completely flaccid, they change it out for another one. Like I said, it's rare, but if you're somebody that is fully engorged and then goes completely flaccid, that would be a situation. Most people are kind of in the middle, you know, so it doesn't matter if you're 50% erect or 20% erect or fully erect, the device will hold you extended no matter what. The other question is, can you use a pump? Absolutely, yes, you can use the pump. Keep in mind, when you start out, you're going to be fully engorged and then you're going to go flaccid. So we still recommend measuring while flaccid, even with the pump. The only exception is that if you're going to use the constriction rings, so meaning the rings on the back that cut off the blood supply. So in that case, where it may keep you, say, 80% erect, and you kind of have that hinge effect where you're not totally erect and you're just looking for a little extension, you can absolutely do that. And you can measure at that weakest state, meaning if you're always going to be at 80%, it's okay to measure at that 80% mark. If you're going to use the restriction rings, what I suggest is measure like normal and then just go down one size on the length. Each one of these sizes is basically a half an inch, so a 10 is 5 inches. So each one of these spaces is just a half an inch, and that's usually enough to account for the constriction ring. They're about a half inch thick. So yes, you can use a pump, and just make sure if you're using the constriction rings to take off a half an inch. So another question is you know, what happens if you slip out after you get the device? Let's say you get the device and it slips out. Okay, I never suggest using the band again. We always want to just use the Elator as a guide. So let's say you slip out. And I usually ask two questions, or one question in two different ways. So when you attach it and you slipped out, are you dry or are you lubricated? So if you slip out while you're dry, meaning there's no lubricant, you just put it on and it slips out, I suggest two sizes tighter, okay? But if you put it on and you're dry and it stays on, but then once you lubricate it, it slips off, I would suggest just going down one girth size. So if you slip out while dry, two sizes. If you slip out only when you're lubricated, go down one size, okay? Now as for the length, so this is important. We give you 4 different base rings, right? So you want to find one that's snug, but it's not too tight where it's cutting off blood flow. This is just a support device. It doesn't restrict blood flow or anything like that. So it's basically just going to hold it on the back, so it gives you the support, right? So what happens sometimes if it's too long, a couple things will happen. One, you know, you point up, or the base ring starts kind of twisting to the side, you know, starts twisting, trying to get some extra length, or you just feel like you're stretched out too much. So if it is too long indeed, what I suggest is reattach it, use the base ring, and let the clip slide past the base ring. So let's say you're standing there and it's too long, and then you slide it back and you said, okay, that's a comfortable length. I want it to feel like that. I want it to look like that. Now we can see, you can use your fingers like a spacer. A lot of people do that. And you can see that's about a half an inch. That's 1 finger length's distance you can measure. So if it's 2 fingers, you'll measure your fingers afterwards and you say, okay, that's 1 inch. So just use your finger as a guide. Just let it slide past it until you get to a comfortable length, and then you'll know, okay, well, that's an inch shorter. So I'm going to order 2 sizes length shorter. And when you're reordering the lengths, measure the shaft. So instead of using what you ordered, like say you ordered a 12, which is 6 inches, but if you order a 12, we're going to probably send you a 10. So that's 5 inches. So for example, if somebody orders a 12 and they say, oh, I want one size shorter, they order an 11, well, then we would send them one that's actually longer. So we wanted to avoid that confusion. So we just say, order the shaft in inches. So you can always just measure it, and like I said, the conversion is simple. So if it's 10, it's 5 inches. So you measure it from end to end, and then we can make you a shorter one or longer one in half-inch increments. So that's the way to handle the different lengths and girths. Now, if it's too short, it's pretty obvious. You're pointed down, okay? So if you're pointed down, usually like a 45-degree angle, I usually say 1 size. If you're pointed straight to the ground, it's probably 2 sizes or more. And that one gets a little tricky because you need to basically hold the base ring, hold the shaft to the desired length, and then measure that space. So whatever space you're going to have in here is going to be the additional length. One thing I wanted to mention on the girth size. Let's say the girth size is so big you can't even put it on while dry. It slips right off, right? So in that instance, I literally just suggest getting some tissue paper and just kind of folding it up and then just lining the inside of it. Just enough to give you a little extra friction, a little extra to hold on there, and that way you can get the length measurement. But if you're slipping out without dry, that easily where it just won't stay on at all, then you might be even 3 sizes tighter on the girth, but usually 2 will do it. The other thing is, let's say it's too tight, but you want to check the length. So what I suggest in that instance is, let's say it's so tight you can't even close it. So that's fine. Just get it around the head, slide this up as far as you can. Maybe you only get it halfway or something like that. That's fine. So as long as it just holds on, and then clip it on the back. And the goal is obviously to be pointed straight out. So if you're pointed straight out, the length is great. You just got to figure out the different size on the girth. If it is too small, this is what I suggest, is wrap it around the head of your penis, and let's say it gets that far away. This distance is what you want to measure. So each girth size is a 1/4 inch in circumference. So if this is about a 1/4 inch away, you'll want to go 1 size bigger on the girth. If it's a 1/2 inch away, you want to go 2 sizes bigger on the girth. So that's how you figure out how to make a new shaft if the first one doesn't fit. So a couple other common questions we get are, is there any discomfort to the partner? So I always joke, if there was a discomfort for the partner, we would have been out of business in 10 days, not stayed in business for over 10 years. So my wife and I, we tried it when we first came up with this device. We first tried it out. I wouldn't consider selling anything I didn't believe in. And my wife basically gives the same feedback of every one of our customers. So basically the feedback is, no, we don't feel the front loop. It's behind the head of the penis, and this is a soft medical grade silicone, so they don't feel this part. They do feel the bars, but they're not uncomfortable or painful. They're very thin. They're about the thickness of a penny. So they're very thin. The only important thing I say is make sure the penis is gliding across the bottom of the bars. And the only time that will not happen is if you have a base ring that's too big, and that will create a space. You can kind of visualize it here. You got a base ring that's too long, you're going to end up with a space like that. So that's going to be uncomfortable. The other thing is if you measure too long, what can happen is you create like a bow in here. So if you envision this bow, and you can see that it's going to be uncomfortable for your partner. So, and also, getting used to it. If there's any discomfort, or you just want to start out slow, you can always put a condom in it, and that does answer another question. Yes, you can use a condom with the device. The only other time I've heard of some discomfort, some people have said that a different position, doggy style, is uncomfortable. I've never tried this. I do have a lot of people that have done it though. They've actually flipped it upside down. So instead of using it like this, they literally just flipped it upside down and used this on the top part of their penis for that position. So that's something you can try. So another question, can you use it for oral sex or anal? Yes, absolutely. There's no problem with that. Some people ask, how long does it last? Most people get about 2 to 3 years, but it really depends on obviously the usage and how you care for it. And that leads me to the next question is like, how do you care for it? So one thing I suggest is when you're cleaning it, just use lukewarm water and a mild soap. So some people, they clean it with really, really hot water. So think of this silicone. It's a very thin layer of silicone because there is metal under here. So the hotter the water, the quicker the silicone is going to degrade. So lukewarm water is fine. And use a mild soap. You know, any really tough soap is going to degrade this. Don't ever use alcohol. Some people clean it in alcohol thinking they need to sterilize it, but that's going to degrade this so fast. And always use either a gel or a silicone lubricant. You don't want to use a petroleum-based. There are a couple out there. Vaseline is probably the most commonly one known, but don't use that because that'll degrade the silicone. And then just make sure you keep it in a somewhat cool environment. You know, room temperature is good. Just don't store it in your garage or store it in a glove box of your car because that's going to degrade it really quick. So that's pretty much the most common questions that I've ever had. People ask if we can make different base ring sizes. The answer is no. We have these 4 sizes. People ask if we can make a custom girth size, something bigger than the eye, and the answer to that is no. Just because the minimum quantities in the molds, we would have to get 2 different sets of bars and a spring, 500 of each. We'd have to make a new mold. The total cost for this just to make one new size at today's market would probably be $25,000, $35,000. So it's a very rare subset of customers that use, you know, those larger size. So we don't have that ability. That's pretty much all the questions I can think of. But if you have any others, please don't hesitate to call us or email us. We also have a chat on our website. So thanks for watching. Bye-bye.